Om. 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 Om Sahana Bhavatu Sahanao Bhunaktu Sah Viryam Karva Vahai Tejasvinavaditamastu Ma Vidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Om Sadashiva Samarambham Shankaracharya Madhyamam Asmad Acharya Paryantam Vande Guru Paramparam. Om Gurur Brahma Gurur Vishnu Gurur Devo Maheshwaraha Guru Sakshat Param Brahma Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Om Saraswati Namastubhyam Varade Kama Rupini Vidyarambham Karishyami Siddhirbhavatu me sada Karpanyadoshopahatha svabhavaha Prachami tvam dharma samudhacetaha Yashrehasya nishchitam bruhitan me Sishyasteham shadhi mam tvam prapannam. Om Vangme Manasi Pratishtitam Mano Me Vachi Pratishtitam Avira Virma Edhi Vedasyama Anishtaha Shrutam Me Ma Prahasihi Anena Aditena Ahoratran Sandadhami Ritam Vadishyami Satyam vadishyami tanmam avatu tad bhaktaram avatu mam avatu bhaktaram. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Om Bhadram Karnivihi Shunuyama Devaha Bhadram Pasya Makshaviryajatraha Thirairangai Tushtubhagvam Sastanuvihi Vashema Devahitam Yadayuhu Swastina Indro Vridhashravaha Swasti na Pusha Vishwavedaha Swasti na Tarakshyo Arishtanemihi Swasti no Brihaspati Dadhatu. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Om Aham Vrikshasya Reriva Kirti Prishtam Gireriva Urdhva Pavitro Bhajiniva Swa Amritam Asmi Praviragvam Swavarchasam Sumedha Amritokshitaha Iti Trishankur Vedanuvachanam. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti.
Narayan, everyone. Welcome back. Okay, so we were supposed to take the quiz today, but I got individual messages from a lot of people that they couldn't make it today. So we are going to do chapter 15, and we will take a poll after the class for a couple of dates on when we should be doing the quiz for chapter 14. All right. So chapter 15 is the Purushottam Yoga, right? Last time we had done the first 4 shlokas. Now, this chapter has a lot of significance in general, and it is one of the 3 chapters jiske shlokas are recommended that we learn, right? And the Three chapters are chapter 3, chapter 12, and chapter 15. Okay. Chapter 15 is one of the shortest chapters in Gita, only 20 shlokas, and yet it is very, very important because this is the last chapter in entire Gita where Krishna ji expounds upon the Gyan, upon the philosophy. And it's the last chapter in which he tries to explain the reality, right? So he will try and explain the reality of what the world is in a very shortened form. Okay. And here in the beginning of the chapter, he uses the example of a tree to help explain the how to understand what this world looks like. And then he'll go on to explain his reality, like who he really is. Okay. So he tries to explain to us that what the sansar is by comparing it to a tree. And the specific example of a tree he took is the peepal tree, the Ashwath tree. And he uses the example of Ashwath tree specifically because Ashwath tree is considered to be the best amongst all the trees in the world because it is evergreen and every single part of that tree is used for some seva or the other in the world. Every part is useful it has some kind of medicinal property, right? Now he says that this tree is like the tree of sansar is a imagine it as a when you visualize it as a upside down tree where the roots are that of Bhagwanji. Okay, root of a tree is what sustains the tree, right? And what sustains the tree is what sustains the tree of this world is Bhagwanji. Everything is he is the basis of everything, right? So if you want to grow a tree to be strong, you don't water its branches, you don't put water on its root, on its leaves, right? You water the roots. And that's how, if we want to have a stronger experience of this world, what we need to water is Bhagwanji. And and we need to water the relationship we have with Bhagwanji, right? That is what needs to be watered, not everything else on top what you see, right? And similarly again, Bhagwan, like the roots which are the sustaining factor, they are not visible. Most of the times they are under the ground, right? Similarly, Bhagwanji is not visible to the physical eye, right? You need an eye of discernment to be able to visualize him. That's what we will read in Shloka 10 also in this class. So he is hidden behind the apparent sansar. So that is why he is the root of this tree. And from the root of the tree, the main trunk is the Rajoguni Bhav, which is Brahma. So Brahmaji is what? He's basically Narayan taking the Rajoguni Bhav, right? To create this world. So the trunk is Brahma, the Rajogun. And from that, the various branches come out. These branches are basically the three gunas, right? The three gunas create the branches. And depending on the ascendancy of a particular guna, you will have branches that go up, that remain in the middle, or they go down. So when there is ascendancy of Satogun, then the branches go up, and those are the realms, the seven upper realms that we talk about, the Gandharvas, the Kinnars, the Devas. And then you have the middle one where the Rajogun is in the ascendancy. Rajogun is in the ascendancy, but Satogun and the Tamogun is very low in this case, right? So then you go into the human form, right? The field of action. And when Tamogun is on the rise, then there we talk about the branches coming downwards, and that is the lower seven realms, the animals, the plants, the insects, all of that comes in the lower seven realms, right? And then what are the leaves, right? On the leaves are the ones that actually absorb the sunlight, and they do the entire photosynthesis. So they help in and then so these leaves have been compared to Vedas, because Vedas, all the rules of this world, what govern this rules, what govern this world are all enshrined in Vedas, right? Whether you believe them or you don't believe them, it doesn't matter. They basically capture the rules which govern every single life form in this world, right? And we all are subject to it without knowing it, just the way we are subject to the laws of physics, like gravity, right? It doesn't matter who you are, you will be governed by these laws. So Vedas are like the leaves of this tree. Okay. Um, and then Bhagwanji tells us that that the, in people tree, you have these small roots, the secondary roots that come down, right? The vines that come down and then they get attached. So these vines of the tree are the sense objects, right? So they represent the sense objects. And sense objects, when you get attached and you get embroiled in these sense objects, they will come down, and they only come down to the realm of the human beings. They don't go into devas, they don't go into the seven lower realms. They only come down to the realm of the human beings, because this is the space where we have the willpower, we have the ability, the ichha shakti, right? We have a choice, right? So the sense objects create these roots that come down and they bind us further. Okay. So they create the secondary roots from which new trees prop up. And the fruits are the fruits of our actions, the karma that we do, from which further trees will get created, right? So this is how he explains how this world is similar to the tree. Now, another thing that he tells us is that a people tree, right? It's an evergreen tree, and it has an extraordinarily long life. So when you look at a tree, because of its extraordinarily long life, in most cases, human beings are born, they see a tree there, and they don't know when it was born, when it was created, and it feels like it has always been here, and it will always continue to be there, right? So similarly, Bhagwanji tells us that this sansar, which is basically his Maya, is as anadi, without beginning, as himself. He is anadi, his power is also anadi. So there is no way for us to figure out what is the beginning of this world. So questions around why was this world created? Why was I created? These are questions that in our current form, we will never be able to answer. These are inexplicable questions given the consciousness where we are at. And so Bhagwanji tells us that these are not the questions that we should be indulging in at this stage, right? When you get to the Vedantic level, that's when you can start to ask these questions and you will start to seek those answers, right? But we have a long way to go before going there. Basically, he's basically telling us that, don't ask class 12 questions. Even if I give you the answer, you have no ability or faculty to be able to understand it, right? So when you are in class 1, 2, 3, 4, just like ask those questions and do what needs to be done. You have to first learn plus minus before you can learn integration or differentiation, right? So, and then he says that this world is, even though it looks completely permanent, right, like a tree, but actually it is constantly changing. It is constantly in a state of flux. Like new leaves are constantly coming into it, old leaves are falling down, new branches are being created, new vines are getting created, new fruits are being created, old fruits that are rotten fruits, they fall down. So there is a constant state of flux in this tree. And yet, when you look at it, it feels as if it is permanent and there is no change in it, right? So similar illusion happens with this world too. Okay, so this is how he explains to us that this is the nature of the world. The nature of the world is like this people tree, feels permanent, even though it is extremely transient, and it is extremely and it is constantly, like, the way and the reason he's explaining this gyan to us is for us to be able to get that wisdom. Now, what are you supposed to do with this understanding? Now, Bhagwanji says, now you have to be able to see, ultimately, all gyan is towards what? For us to be able to achieve self-realization, right? So how do you achieve self-realization? Through this understanding. Now, when you understand that this is the real nature of this world, then you also get to understand that, boss, is this really what I want to spend my time on? Ultimately, this is not real. you will really start to understand, your intellect will start to understand that this is all unreal, just like a dream. Even though it feels real, like if I were in a dream, it feels real, but this is really, really unreal. Once your intellect starts to understand that, then you and you, the more you understand it, the deeper the conviction becomes, right? The deeper the conviction, then more your desires, which are now entrenched in the sansar, will start to loosen their shake around the sansar. And you start to get into a space of desirelessness for the sansar. How do you become desireless for sansar? Because desires are not going to go away, right? The trick is to have desire for God. Once you understand what is real, what is unreal, then you start to understand that there is something much bigger. I am constantly running after these small conveniences, small petty pleasures, trying to avoid petty pain, right? That has been my life thus far, like a child running after toy cars. And then he understands, oh, there's a real car out there. Oh, there's so much more fun when you're actually sitting in a real car and driving it, right? So after he gets that experience, he's like, boss, I don't want these small baby cars, right? He doesn't want them. He wants that real car. So that's the similar sort of a progression that happens for our intellect as well. And then it becomes nishchayatmika buddhi. It says, why do I want to go for these petty small pleasures of this world when I can go into eternal bliss by experiencing Bhagwanji and understanding what Bhagwanji really is, and understanding how I am Bhagwanji myself, which doesn't feel like that at all, right? So that is how our vivek comes in. The vivek, the wisdom of nishchayatmika buddhi, that this is real and everything else is real. Only he is real, everything else is unreal. And once vivek settles in, and the stronger the vivek becomes, from that vivek, show me. Let me finish my sentence and I'll come to you.
Next 5 more.
Okay, well done.
It was really easy.
But you need to wait for me to finish my sentences before you button, okay? Thank you. So where was I? When the Vivek comes in, with that Vivek comes Vairagya. Vairagya has been compared to an axe, okay? And with the axe of Vairagya, with the axe of disengagement or detachment from the sense object, you're able to cut the root. And what roots are we talking about? We are not talking about the main root. We are talking about cutting the secondary roots. The secondary roots that are born of the sense objects. So attachment to the sense objects is cut asunder by the use of this axe of Vairagya. Okay. So this is what we had basically covered in the last class. And now we will start with the Shloka 5. Okay, just 1 second. Yes. Sorry, I'm back. Okay. So Shloka 5. Okay. Nena, do you want to read with us the Shloka 5?
Characteristics possessed by persons with such an attainment are described by the Lord.
Yeah. So a person who has been able to understand the real nature of this world as a people tree, that person, he says that after such a person has managed to cut the tree with the axe of Vairagya, he is able to, after that, he's able to set his sights on a single goal with the Nishchayatmika Buddhi. And the single goal is that of self-realization. All other goals fall away. And everything in this world is then utilized towards that one particular goal. Okay. For this kind of a person, what are the characteristics of this kind of a person? A person who has only one goal in life. Okay. And why does he have one goal in life? because he has understood what is real and what is unreal. Right? Now let's read, how do you identify this kind of a person? Nirmana moha jit sang doshaha
निर्माणमोहाजितसङ्गदोषा
आध्यात्मनेत्या विनिवृत्त कामाः
आध्यात्मनित्या विनिवृत्तकामा
द्वन्द्वैर्विमुक्ताः सुखदुःखसंज्ञैः
द्वन्द्वैर्यमुक्ताः सुखदुःखसंज्ञैः
गच्छन्त्यमूढा पदमव्ययं तत्
गच्छन्त्यमूढाः पदमव्ययं तत्. Free from pride and expectation, free from the evil of involvement, dwelling constantly in spirituality, completely free from desires, free from the dualities like pleasure and pain, such undeluded ones attain to the supreme immutable state.
Yeah. So if you go back to this shloka, nirman moha, without man, without pride, and moha, without expectations, moh, attachments, expectations. Jita sanga doshaha, the evil of dosh, evil. The evil of involvement, sang, okay, free from that. Jita, you have won over it, right? So free from the evil of involvement. Adhyatma nitya, dwelling in spirituality, constantly dwelling in adhyatma, the spirituality. Vinivratta kamaha, kamaha, desire, free from desire. So this guy is free from pride, free from desires, free from attachment, and free from involvement, constantly dwelling in spirituality. Dvander vimukta, mukta from, free from the dualities like the happiness and pleasure, the pleasure and pain, right? The petty pleasures and pains, he's free from these dualities. He can remain equanimous in the face of these equalities. Such a person who has these characteristics sets his sights on the goal of self-realization, and he walks this path and ultimately achieves him.
Characteristics of persons attaining the supreme state. Free from pride and expectations. Having a feeling of superiority leads to pride. Doing good to others with the hope of gaining some worldly objectives leads to expectations. An aspirant for the supreme is free from both these frailties. Free from the evil of involvement. One who performs actions with some selfish end in view is said to suffer from the evil of involvement. A person aspiring for the supreme state has to be free from this evil. Dwelling constantly in spirituality. Spiritual values are the guiding forces in the performance of actions in the world, and the aspirant forsakes the selfish worldly outlook in thoughts, speech, and actions. Free from desires. While performing essential duties, such an aspirant does not seek fulfillment of desires. Provision for the necessities of life is made by the merciful dispensation of the Lord. Free from dualities, such a person bears with equanimity the dualities of life like pleasure and pain, heat and cold. Equipped with these qualities, a person is fit for attainment of the supreme state. Such a person is free from all the torments of worldly delusion.
Correct. So this is important, right? Equipped with these qualities, a person is fit for attainment of supreme state. The attainment of supreme state will only happen. We can't attain it ourselves. It will only happen with the grace of God. He gives it to us. Until he gives it to us, we can't attain it. There is no path to attaining that gyan ourselves. It only is bestowed upon us by his grace. However, we are supposed to first make ourselves fit. That is our action. make ourselves a fit receptacle to receive that grace. Once we have created the fit receptacle to receive his grace, he always will give his grace. He does not withhold his grace from us if we are fit receptacles, right? He only withholds that grace from us only and only until we are not fit to receive that grace. And that's because if he gives it to us before we are ready for it, then we will not be able to handle it, and it will lead to our own patan. It will lead to our own disgrace, right? It will lead to our own downfall. So he protects us from our own selves and gives things to us at the time that it is that we are ready for it. And that is true for everything, not just grace, right? So what do we have to do in the process? We have to use karma yoga, we have to use bhakti yoga to be able to develop these qualities amongst us. So when a person is following perfect karma yoga, that person is obviously free from involvement because he is no longer doing things for his swarth. He's doing things for parmarth, right? He's not doing things for his selfish requirements, for his selfish means. He's doing this for the good of everyone. And he is doing these things not because of a certain desire to attain something, but because it is a particular duty as enshrined in scriptures. So he lives his life as per the scriptures, as per he does all the duties that are enjoined upon him based on his ashram of life, based on his varn. He's going to do all the duties that are prescribed to him. And he is free from any expectations from other people, right? Because he's not doing things to get anything back, right? He's doing things only as a sense of duty. He does this with a sense of complete surrender to Bhagwanji. There is no ego. There is no concept of I am doing something, right? As soon as you don't have that ego that I am doing something, you don't have that sense of doership, there is no sense of enjoyership either, because you've not done something, so there is no expectations of enjoying the fruits of those results either. Everything, this person, he's constantly dwelling in spirituality, and hence he understands that everything he's doing is doing because the opportunity for such seva has been given to him by Bhagwanji. The resources to do the seva has been given to him by Bhagwanji. The energy to perform the seva has been given to him by Bhagwanji, and it has only been given to him for one and one reason alone. That reason is self-realization for his own ultimate uddhar. Right? When a person who constantly is dwelling at that level of spirituality, is constantly engaging in the world like that, then that person becomes a fit receptacle. Right? So for this, basically, what do we have to do to be this? To do Karma Yoga and Bhakti Yoga. Bhakti Mishrit Karma Yoga. That is what we need to do on a daily basis. Right? Bhakti Mishrit Karma Yoga, not Bhakti Yoga, where you were just sitting around and just singing bhajans. Not just Karma Yoga, because just simple Karma Yoga will always constantly give you a sense of doership. Ego is very difficult to kill. In fact, with Karma Yoga comes massive sense of doership until you put Bhakti Yoga in it and you surrender yourself to Bhagwanji. Only then will you kill the ego. Will you surrender the ego to Bhagwanji's will, right? Otherwise, your will is constantly asserting itself in various sneaky ways. So that's why our path is Bhakti Mishrit Karma Yoga. This is what will happen to us. These are the characteristics we will develop, right? Freedom from dualities. Actually, constantly we are in that space of Ragdvesh. If you observe yourself for just like a few hours, you just observe yourself for an hour a day, you will see in that entire hour, all you are doing is operate from Rag and Dvesh, likes and dislikes. I want this, so let's do this more. I don't want this, so avoid this. Don't say this, don't do this, because I want to avoid such and such reaction or behavior or result that accrues from that action. We are only operating in the space of duality. Running after pleasure, running after convenience, avoiding pain. Okay. So such a person is actually free from these dualities. He neither runs after one, nor does he go after, or nor does he avoid something else. Whatever comes, he takes this with a sense of equanimity and knows that this too shall pass. Okay. He has no sense of like or dislike towards any duality that comes to him, right? Just as we read in the last chapter that such a person has no sense of like or dislike for satogun or rajogun or tamogun. He will use them for what purpose they are meant to be. Such a person he treats gold and mud exactly the same fashion, which is, what is their utility in my path towards doing my duty? Not by the value in monetary terms that is ascribed to them, right? That is the characteristic of a person who is constantly doing Bhakti Mishrit Karma, right? Now, such a person becomes fit for attainment of supreme state, and with the grace of God, he will achieve the supreme state. What is the supreme state? Now, Bhagwanji will tell what is the supreme state. And now again, you cannot understand Bhagwanji by describing who he really is, right? The only way scriptures ever get to describe him is not this, neti, neti. There are no words to explain what he is, because words are also a part of his Maya. So the closest we can get to explaining who he is by saying what he is not. When you remove everything that he is not, what remains is him. Right? Because we are trying to talk about transcending Maya while being inside this Maya, which is impossible, right? The only way to do that is by saying this neti neti. So now he will explain to us what is not, right? That's how he's constantly been talking about, right? Bhagyashree, do you want to read with us?
Yeah. The Lord now describes the supreme state.
न तद्भासयते सूर्यः
न तद्भासयते सूर्यः
न शशाङ्को न पावकः
न शशाङ्को न पावकः
यद्गत्वा न निवर्तन्ते
यद्गत्वा न निवर्तन्ते
तद्धाम परमं मम.
तद्धाम परमं मम. Neither the sun nor the moon nor fire shines there, and having attained which no one returns, that is my supreme abode. Peerless effulgence of the supreme state. The effulgence of the supreme state is infinite, yet it is not physical. It is the effulgence of the self shining with the light of absolute consciousness. This is why the Lord says that neither the sun nor the moon nor fire shines there. In fact, these luminous bodies get their luster from a small part of the divine effulgence. Having attained that state, the individualized self does not revert to the world of mortality or to the cycle of births and deaths, but experiences supreme and eternal bliss.
So here he's explaining to us that Bhagwanji's effulgence, the luster, is something that is beyond comparison. It is beyond anything that we have seen. So the most luminous objects or the most luminous experiences we have in our life are what? Sun, moon, and fire, right? In terms of the light that they shine on this world, right? That luminosity, he's saying, even they are an extremely small part of his effulgence. None of these shine there. Why? Because they too derive themselves. His effulgence is beyond these as well, right? So these things can't be providing light to him or his abode, right? They derive their luminosity from Bhagwanji, right? Just like we did in the Vibhuti Yoga. What was Bhagwanji trying to show us? That he was trying to show us the most majestic of our experiences in this world, physical or mental or emotional or spiritual, whatever experiences we can have in this world. He was taking the most the highest form of that experience and saying that of all the mountains, for example, I am Everest, right? He used those examples, right? Of all the things that are luminous, or of all the things that are effulgent, I am the sun, right? So he was trying to show that within our worldly experience, whatever we have experienced, the highest of that is him. And that highest experience that we have is also a very small, tiny portion of who he really is. So he's not even this. It is just a small portion of him. Can you even begin to imagine? Can your mind even begin to fathom what is the power? What is the beauty? What is the effulgence? And what is the, like, who this entity really is? Your mind will get boggled by those, that when you start to think about it, like really, really think higher and higher than Mount Everest, calmer than Mount Everest, or the eye on those ice-capped snows, right? What is more effulgent than sun? We can't even imagine what that feels like. What can be more sheetal than the moonlight, right? What can be more dayalu than the most kind person we've ever known in our lives? Mother Teresa. Who can be more selfless than her, giving that kind of like that kind of seva to the world, right? Think of the most extreme in any dimension of your life that your mind can get to, and think that he's way beyond that. This is just a small aspect of him. That is who he is. Neti, neti, neti. I'm not even this, and I'm not even that, and I'm past even this. I am greater than this. That is the way for us to start, for our mind to be able to think about what entity are we dealing with. And more importantly, that entity is really us. This limited little self that we have and that we are constantly hankering after. This is actually him. Like, that is a mind-boggling statement to make, right? So then he says that now that we kind of understand to some degree, our intellect understands to some degree who he really is. Now we'll go on where he will talk about the individualized self, why it gets tangled, and what is, like, how can it free itself from these tentacles, right? Why are we not able to understand that we are really him? Why don't we feel that limitless? Why don't we feel that effulgence? Why don't I feel that level of kindness or love, that compassion? Why do I feel so small? Karpanya dosh, right? Why do I have that karpanya dosh? Let's read this. Vijay, do you want to read with us?
Sure. In Shloka 4, the Lord had said that for the individualized self, an easy method to be free from tentacles of the world is to take refuge in Him with devotion. The Lord now tells what the individualized self is.
So what is this individualized self? No. Okay, no. Mamaivansho jivaloke
Mamaivamsho jivaloke
jivabhuta sanatanaha
jivabhuta sanatanaha
manah shasthani indrani
manashashtani indrani
prakritisthani karshati.
prakrisistani karshati. It is indeed an eternal portion of myself which becomes living soul in realm of living beings and abiding in nature, draws to itself six senses including the mind. The individualized self as a portion of supreme self. In this shloka, the world has been spoken as realm of living beings. The individualized self, though a portion of supreme self, is endowed with conceit of being a doer of actions and experience of their results. This can be understood from an example. The sun's reflection in water contained in a vessel appears to be portion of the sun. If the water is thrown out, the reflection also disappears. The rays of the sun reflected from the water continue to radiate from the sun. even after the reflection disappears. Similarly, when the illusion of gunas of nature is thrown off, the individualized self realizes its identity with Supreme Self, and also the fact that it is separate existence was only illusory. This sloka should not be taken to mean that Supreme Self gets broken into several parts, giving rise several forms of individualized self. The latter is said to be portion of the former, in the same way as the reflection seems to have entity separate from the sun, though in fact it is never separated. When the individualized self regards itself of abiding in nature or being under the influence of gunas of nature, then it draws to itself the five senses of perception and also the mind. It may be observed that the mind performs the function of both perception as well as those of action. Strictly speaking, the mind is part of internal medium of human being, which is quartet of mind, intellect, awareness, and ego. This quartet is loosely referred as mind, including the remaining three also in the term. The drawing up of five senses is effected with the help of the vital power prana. As has been said before, prana is not breath, but it's a cosmic power inhaled with breath, which energizes the senses.
So what is individualized self, right? The individualized self is essentially a small portion of the cosmic self, the big S. And this small portion of the cosmic self essentially will draw to itself. It is going to subject itself through its own will to the nature, which means the three gunas are going to come and bind itself to it, right? And what it does is that in this space, then it will attract to itself the the senses, the mind, the intellect, the chitta or the consciousness as we call it, and the intellect, the mind, the BMI, intellect, mind, all the body parts, and the chitta, right? So it is going to, and the ego, right? So it is going to get all of this together and it gets hewn in together, it gets bound together to the individualized self through pran. Generally speaking, we say that pran is the breath. But actually, when we go deeper down in yoga, we understand that pran is actually, there are 5 types of pran. There are basically 5 types of, which are also called the 5 types of breath, right? When we say pran is breath, basically that pran as breath is just the gross level of expression of pran, right? At a subtler level, pran is the energy which binds everything together. As long as that pran stays inside the body, it keeps the senses, the mind, the intellect, the ego bound to this particular body. When the pran leaves, all these senses, the subtle body as we call it, okay, this subtle body leaves the gross body. Okay, so when we die, when we say we die, basically it is the body that dies, and the the intellect, the ego, the mind, with all its impressions of the likes, the dislikes, the karmas that it has done, which are stored in chit, along with when we say along with senses, it basically means that these impressions within the chit, right, when they express themselves in the body, then you know that, oh, this person is more sensitive to light or sun or whatever, right? Like all of those things, basically that's what it means. It means that it is you take the senses along with you, right? Your attachments, your involvement in the senses. Somebody's a foodie, right? His involvement with his tongue is very high. Or somebody is a loose talker, right? His involvement with his sense of tongue in terms of like being able to speak is very high, likes to gossip. All of these impressions and your involvement with senses, which are stored in your chit, they go with you, right? They are bound to the individualized self. Okay, and this entire complex transfers itself from body to body to body. But what he's trying to tell us is that when we see that, so this individualized self, however, is part of Paramatma. But having been bound like this individualized self develops this sense of ego that I am the doer, I am separate from Paramatma, I am something small here with these limitations around me. Okay. And because I'm limited and I'm small with very small set of resources, I'm finite. Right? So this self has a sense of finiteness, which it is trying to increase to infinite because he's part of infinite. Until he becomes infinite, he's not satisfied. So there is this constant craving of becoming infinite. When it actually is infinite, right? Now, why is this finite? Why is this infinite self thinking itself to be finite? Because it has chosen to bound itself by the three gunas of nature. And as we read in last chapter, these three gunas are the reason for this disillusionment. These three gunas create the disillusion that they create this illusion that I am separate from the larger cosmic self. And that I'm separate from you. You're separate from me. Your kingdom is separate from my kingdom. My satta is separate. है ना? Now, when you see this individualized self pass from one body to another, to another, to another, right? Pehle to, we don't recognize that this body is me, right? Now, so there are two levels of disillusionment here. First level of disillusionment is you are in this body. Okay, at that stage, your entire BMI complex is tightly bound to this body. Okay, so your sense of self becomes not even the subtle body. Your sense of self becomes this physical body. Okay, your sense of self becomes this physical body, that I am this physical body. And this body is young. Now this body is becoming older. This body is getting these diseases. This body is ailing. This body must be beautified. And I will do everything to keep it looking young, fit, beautiful. I'll beautify this body because this is me. That is the first level of very strong disillusion. And it happens because of the three gunas. Okay. Now what happens is that actually your individualized self is constant, right? It goes around, right? Now think about this body as it feels like this body is leaving, right? It feels like, okay, the body is here. This is the permanent thing. My body is here. The self is in this. This Atma is passing out of this. Or at the time of birth, this is coming into this. Actually, this individualized self doesn't go anywhere. Okay, it is a body that is permanent or impermanent. This comes and goes. This comes and goes. This comes and goes. And this individualized self, with its senses, it attaches itself to a particular body when there is utility, when it wants to express itself, when it wants to go through the Karma Yoga and reach Bhagwan. And when this body finishes its utility, because the body is now like an old ragtag of a cloth, it no longer serves your purpose. At that stage, this BMI complex withdraws the pran from it and lets it go. But it stays, right? This is first level of disillusionment. The moment it gets into this body, then it says, oh, I'm the body, I'm the body, I'm the body. Okay, you become even more finite. Now, when the body drops away, this individualized self with its BMI complex is still disillusioned. It still thinks that it has become subtle, right? It has subtle, but yet it has all its ragdvesh. It has its sense of separateness and it has its sense of finiteness. Okay, a little less than when it was attached to a body, but it is still separate. Okay, it is still disillusioned because it has attached itself to that. It has attached itself to the three gunas. It has subjected itself to the nature. Only when this individualized self is able to let go of all the ragdvesh, all those things that it has captured, all the baggage it has collected in its chitta, through the karma yoga. It cannot do it in the subtle self. Okay, when it is in this subtle form, okay, and the subtle form takes the form of, like, top 7 realms, or it takes the form of lower 7 realms, right, as animal or insect or plant or gandharv or kinnar or dev, to enjoy the fruits of what it did in the human form. At that stage, it has no choice. Okay, in these forms, in these bodies, these branches, the upper branches and the lower branches, it extinguishes some part of the baggage that it has collected, the baggage of good and the bad deeds, right? It extinguishes that, it becomes lighter. And at some stage, Bhagwan says, okay, now you're ready to come back into the human realm, right? But for the time that it is neither here nor there nor in the middle, it is just in the subtle form, it has taken no form of body, there is nothing that happens to it. Nothing that happens to it. It remains with its sense of separateness. It pines for all the raga and dvesh that was there, still stays with it. So if it pined for an apple, it will still pine for an apple. I want that apple, unless it has extinguished that vasana, as maybe having been born as an apple worm. Right now, it has eaten as many apples as it could in its lifetime. It's like, okay, now that vasana is gone. Right? Bhog kar liya us vasana ka. So now if it has to get out of this sense of separateness, and it has to find its way back to that infinite source that it has come from and what it pines for, what does it have to do? It has to come back into the human form. And when it becomes a part of the human form, that's when it is only going to again take on a body, a human body, and it will have this faculty of choice, because humans are made in the image of God, who has this sense of choice and no one else. Then as a human being, now it has a sense of choice. Now it can choose to live a life based on rag and dvesh, likes and dislikes, based on my vasanas, or it has a choice to do purusharth. The purusharth is exercise of willpower to live as per the scriptures, to live a life which is enjoined by duties and not by the vasanas, to live a life free of expectations from others, to live a life free of involvement in the senses. I am a foodie, but when the food comes to me now, I will look at food as prasad and not as an item of bhog. When I look at it as prasad, as something that I will use to only nourish this body, which is temple of the Lord, then I will only do yoga through that food. Whether I'm fasting, whether I'm feasting, in both those situations, I will only have yoga. But if I'm looking at food as a source of enjoyment for my sense, then I'm using food as bhog. Even though whether I'm fasting or feasting, you may take your senses away from food, but you're still doing bhog. Okay? So it depends on how I'm approaching food. What is my bhav? And what am I using it for? Enjoyment or for yoga with Bhagwanji? Then it doesn't matter whether I'm fasting or feasting at action level. Dono cases mein, you can either be doing bhog or you can be doing yoga. Okay? So when we have that choice, that is when we start to shed away, and then we reach a state of realization with Bhagwanji, when all of our impressions are gone. When I have achieved all the characteristics that we read in Shloka 5. When I'm free from my ego, free of pride, free of expectations, free of desires for the worldly things, free of involvement in my senses. I'm only doing duties. I'm free of all dualities of this world. At that stage, I'm ready and a fit receptacle to receive the grace of Bhagwanji, so that I have the gyan, and then I suddenly see, whoops, oh, I was never this little separate self. I was a part of this infinite self always. But I created this little cage. I tied myself into knots. Okay. Now then the question is, yaar, itne sare diye kyun senses, if all they do is they create these roots in the and entangle us? Diye kyun ye? Now that all of that will get covered over next shlokas, right? So here in this chapter, as you will see, it's literally the crux of everything we've read in a very shortened capsule form, in the form of Gyan that is being given to us. And the last chapter to do so. Okay. Okay. Seventh, right? So we'll go to the next one. Smita, do you want to read with us?
Sure. Connection. The Lord now describes the, sorry, I think,
Yeah, that's the one.
okay. The Lord now describes the characteristics of Tamoguna and also tells how it binds the individualized self.
No.
I think, yeah, yeah, that's what sorry.
Chapter 15, shloka 7.
Yeah.
Connection.
Yeah, no, I think I went to chapter 14 by mistake.
Hmm.
Connection for 8, right?
Yeah, so before 8.
The Lord now describes what happens to the individualized self when the body is deprived of the vital power.
Yeah. So this is when the pran is taken out, you know, because pran is what binds everything. So it uses the power of pran to bind the mind, the intellect, the chitta, and the ego and the sense of the senses to this particular body. What happens? Shariram yadavapnoti
Shariram yadavapnoti
yachapyutkramatiishwarah
yachapyutkramar yacha apyutkrama atishwarah
grahitvetani samyati
grihitvetani samyati
Vayurgandhani vashaya.
vayurgandhani vashaya. Just as a gust of air carries away the scent from its place, similarly, the master, individualized self, carries these, the mind and the senses, when he obtains a body or leaves it.
So the subtle body travels with the individualized self. Okay. After, when it enters the body, it enters with that subtle body. When it leaves the body, it takes the subtle body with it, which means all our past impressions, all our prarabdha, everything, all the impressions we've created through our actions, through our habitual actions, right? They get stored in our chitta, right? They're all the impressions in the mind. I like this or I don't like this. All of that is stored in the mind, right? My intellect, what level my intellect is at, how sharpened my intellect is in a particular life form, right? It carries along so that in my next birth, I start at the same level with my intellect, right? How much of truth do I want? How much do I look up to Bhagwanji versus how much I am completely enamored by my mind telling me, just justify this action. I want to take this action. I like this action. Now you go ahead and justify it, right? Kitni hamari buddhi gandhari buddhi hai versus nishyatmika buddhi hai. All of that is carried along with the individualized self and it goes. This is the subtle body, as we call it, right?
Transference of the individualized self. Truly speaking, the individualized self is eternal and immovable, being part of the eternal and immovable Supreme Self. Its moving into or leaving a body is like the apparent moving of the reflection of the sun with the movement of the water in which it is reflected. The individualized self is said to move out of body or move into one in the same way a person sitting in the train feels that the trees outside are moving away, or as seen from the earth, the sun is said to rise in the east, move across the sky during the day, and set in the west. The important point made out in the shloka is that the connection of the mind and the senses is not as intimate with the body as it is with the individualized self. When the body loses its unity for the individualized self, the latter draws the mind and senses in the same way as air draws scent from flowers.
So basically what he's trying to explain to us is कि हमको इस बॉडी में बैठ के लगता है कि इंडिविजुअलाइज सेल्फ आ रही है, आत्मा आ रही है, आत्मा जा रही है ना? एक्चुअली आत्मा कहीं ना आई ना गई, वो यहीं थी, यहीं रहेगी, हमेशा रहेगी. It is part of Bhagwanji, right? So if that Ansh is part of Bhagwanji, that Ansh, like a holograph, has exactly the same properties as the part of which the larger whole that it is part of. right? So it is anadi, it has no ant, it does not change, it does not move, right? So that is the nature of the individualized self, exactly the same as the cosmic self. But we feel as if it is moving around, it is changing because the point of reference from which we are seeing it is extremely transient, right? So the example of train is given. When we are sitting inside our train, which itself is moving, right? Our point of reference is a transient train. So we sit inside that train, okay? Our consciousness sits inside that train. And then it says, oh, the train is stopped. The train is not moving. The platform is moving. The trees are moving, right? That's how we feel. Just as sitting on the earth, we think earth is not rotating. Earth is stable. The moon and the sun are rotating around us. Sorry, moon is the truth, but the sun is moving around, right? It is rising in the east, setting in the west. The sun is doing no such thing. It is the point of reference which is constantly in motion that creates that illusion of movement. So in this case also, the individualized self is going nowhere. It is the body that comes and goes, changes itself. And because of that, it creates that confusion, or the words that we sometimes use, ki atma aayi aur atma chali gayi. Aisa nahi hota. Atma is there only. Okay? Make sense? Yeah, Vijay.
Yeah, when we talk about moksha, then it is said to be in eternal bliss and stays with the God, right? So, so that line of thought is slightly different than the Atma stays here and continues. Individualized self switches between individualized self is switching between the bodies, right?
Okay. No. They are the same, because क्या होता है कि the way the soul is going to, or the individualized self takes on a body, it is showing you the process through which an individualized self appears itself in a body, discards a body. Okay. The thing is that this entire process of taking on a body or leaving a body is different from, or is parallel to, independent of realization or no realization. Okay? So when an individualized self realizes the truth, it frees itself from the gunas. It no longer considers its identity to be the subtle body, or when it is embodied, then it does not consider itself to be part of this physical body. It doesn't say, I am this body. It says at that time, I am Paramatma. I am Paramatma ka ansh, and I have taken on this body, this physical and the subtle body that's associated with it, to do Bhagwan Ji ka kaam. So you can be fully realized even though you are associated with a physical body, even though you are associated with a subtle body, except that when you have that identification, there is no longer any baggage that you're carrying, because there is no likes and dislikes in this world. You're operating in this world because you know it's unreal, but you're just playing a leela with Bhagwan Ji and having fun in it. So you do not carry any extra impressions. Your chit is empty. You're living every moment as if like you're starting from now. There is no past that comes into your present. Okay. So a realized saint will take on a body by using the pran, by assuming but it does not, he is not under the satta of the Maya. His identity is not determined by Maya. His identity is determined by Bhagwan Ji.
But when we talk about moksha, we always say that the one who is getting relief from the birth and death cycle, right?
Correct. Correct. And that's what we will do in the next shloka as well. So when you say that I am going to free myself from the cycle of birth and death, that means the suffering of birth and death, I'm no longer going to be subject to that. But if I want to assume a form to do Bhagwan Ji ka kaam, I will still come and do it without the suffering associated with birth and death. So when I am saying that I'm free from birth and death, it means I'm free from the, I'm free from the suffering related to birth and death. And second, even though I am taking birth and I'm dying again, I am not involved in this world. My identity remains perpetual. I know that I am this infinite Atma. I am this immovable, infinite Atma, which has no starting and no ending. I know that. And I operate with this world of illusion like that. Can you imagine how would you operate in this world if you were operating from that point of view? Right? So don't take that in its literal sense that you're freed from birth and death. You can choose to not come back, of course, because you're free from that. Now you're free, you have that free will of Bhagwanji. When you decide to express yourself again by taking a body, as a lot of realized saints do, they come into this of their own free will. And they are not subject to any of the sufferings in this world any longer. They come, they do their duty, and they go, and they remain in an everlasting bliss. They are constantly in a state of samadhi, constantly connected to Bhagwanji. You get what I'm saying, right? So what I'm saying is that sense of realization and being in a state of moksha is independent of this process of getting attached to the body. And here the example that he gave us, right, when we talked about Shlok 7, basically he showed the birth of a jivatma that is still deluded. It has not reached moksha. So that is why it feels like, oh, you are taking birth, you're doing all of this, blah, blah, blah. You can still do that even when you are self-realized. And you can choose not to do that also if you are self-realized.
Thank
Okay.
you.
So we're 11:48. Ninth wala. Okay, I think 9th, 10th and all, they are more related. So we'll do it in the next class, even though 9th is very small. Next time we'll try doing 9th, 10th, 11th. Okay, so we'll let go of 9th for now, right? So we'll do the takeaways. It's 11:30. Do you think we should do 9th? छोटा सा है. कर लेते हैं, इसके साथ ही है. Who will read now? Kakuli, will you read with us?
The group of mind, senses, intellect, the ego, and the vital power is known as the subtle body. The Lord says,
Shotram chakshusprshanam cha
Shrotram chakshu sparshanam cha
rasanam ghranameva cha
rasanam ghranameva cha
adhisthaya manaschayam
adhisthaya manaschayam
vishayanupasevate.
Nupasevate, presiding over hearing, sight, touch, taste and smell, as also the mind, he, the individualized self, avails of the sense objects. Availing of the sense objects. In this shloka, the Lord says that equipping itself with the mind and the senses, that is the subtle body, and making the mind the repository of the senses, the individualized self engages in making use of the sense objects. In fact, the self is neither the doer of action nor does it experience the objects, but on account of its apparent relationship with the senses and gunas of nature, it appears to be a doer and an experiencer.
So this is where we get the answer of कि यार sense objects बनाए क्यों? Because sense objects are like the roots, right? So those roots will only come and entangle us, and they become the source of new trees that will be born out of this, right? So here he's saying is that actually sense objects are things that the Jivatma just simply takes on, okay, to do its duties in the world. So these are to be used towards a particular purpose. they are not supposed to be used for bhog. They are to be used for a certain purpose. And what is that purpose? For most of us who are still entangled in this world, for us, the purpose is self-realization. For a self-realized soul who comes in will have a different purpose, whichever purpose has been given to him by the Lord, and he takes on that purpose. ठीक है, हम सबका purpose एक ही है, to get ourselves out of this quagmire, to get ourselves out of this dukhalaya, right? So they are absolutely required, and they are supposed to help us in our journey. The reason the problem happens is because instead of using them towards that purpose, we get entangled in them only. है ना? Like भगवान जी ने भेजा बाजार में कि go and buy something from this bazaar and come back. What we do is we go into that bazaar and then we get lost in the chakachon there. अब हमको जाना था एक shop पे, we would have bought it and we would have come back. For that I've been given legs. For that I've been given eyes. For that I've been given ears. I'll go there and then my eyes, instead of just watching the path and coming back from it, I'm going to see everything else, all the chakachon. And I will like this color. I will like that light. And then I want to go and explore what that light is coming from. I like the music. The ears were given to listen to the shopkeeper with whom I had to interact. I was given a tongue to be able to speak out what I needed. What did I do? I heard some beautiful music. I thought, oh, I want to experience that. My ears really like it. Oh, I like that nazara there. I want to really see it. My eyes are getting a lot of pleasure from seeing it, right? And then I want to, my nose is smelling something really nice. I want to go and smell it. I want to taste it, right? So all of that, that's the involvement. So we, instead of using the senses, instead of us leading the senses that I want to use you for ABC, so instead of me, the individualized self, directing them, they start to direct us. And when I say they start to direct us means what? It's actually the mind, right? The senses are controlled by the mind. Okay? And the mind is the rain. Now, instead of the rain controlling the senses start to dictate the mind. उल्टा हो जाता है, right? The mind and the senses are absolutely fantastic slaves, but very, very bad masters. Problem happens when they become our masters. अब कुछ खाना है, रसगुल्ला खाना है और दिमाग खराब हो गया, नहीं खा पा रहे हैं, तो हमारा दिमाग उसी में लगा हुआ है, हम नहीं खा पाए उस रसगुल्ले को, है ना? फिर I'm not able to focus on anything else. So that then my sense of taste has become my master and not my slave, that I will enjoy it when I want to enjoy it, at a time I want to enjoy it, in a way that I want to enjoy it. वो सब तो चला गया. ठीक है? So that is why the sense objects have been given to us, and now we've understood why they become a problem statement for us. And then how do we make sure that they are no longer problem statement for us? Is by doing the yam and the niyam that is given to us in every anushtan. The yam and the niyam help us in gaining control over the senses. The mind gains control over the senses, and the intellect drives the mind. And we correct the order in which the orders should be passed by following the yam and the niyam as prescribed in the yoga and as prescribed in our anushtan. हमारे अनुष्ठान में छोटा 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 दिया जाता है, हम तो अभी रेडी नहीं है पतंजलि योग सूत्र के लिए. So we are given small projects to take on for limited periods of time to try and develop the faculty or the muscle of that ichha shakti, which will help us correct the order of how the orders should follow. नीचे से ऊपर नहीं, ऊपर से नीचे जाने चाहिए. So we are trying to correct that. हमारी organization बिल्कुल ही unruly है. So now we are trying to bring some order into this organization, है ना? Discipline into the organization. Okay, so with that, I think we'll close the class today and we'll do the takeaways. Who wants to go first?
You can go first. For me, this kind of like eye opener, like the combination of senses with gunas, playing the maya, giving the experiences to the individualized self, right? So if we control the senses, that is going to give different life altogether.
Absolutely. And that is the starting point of yoga. पूरा पतंजलि योग सूत्र which talks about how to get to भगवान जी, उसका starting point ही यम और नियम है. अगर आप यम नियम नहीं कर सकते, ध्यान तो बहुत बाद में आता है, right? Karma Yoga, maybe when we see that first 6 chapters, meditation is chapter 6, the last part of Karma Yoga. Usse pehle is all about controlling our senses, controlling our mind so that it is not swayed by raga and dvesh, so that we can do our duty. Without these two, control over our mind and control over our senses, हम लोग कर ही नहीं सकते duties. Because जैसे ही हम duty करने लगेंगे, तो राग द्वेष आ जाएगा. I have resentments towards people, that will come in. मैं क्यों करूं ये? उसको करना चाहिए, उसका काम है. मैं क्यों दूसरों का काम कर रही हूँ, लोग मुझे स्लेव बना रहे हैं यहाँ पे. ऑल ऑफ दोस थिंग्स विल कम इन. ये करने का मन नहीं कर रहा मेरा, मुझे तो वो करने का मन कर रहा है. कर ही नहीं सकते हम अपनी ड्यूटी if we don't have control over our senses and our mind. Impossible. So that's your first starting point.
I can go. So for me, because I identify more with working, like I feel at peace when I'm working actually at my desk. So one takeaway is that it always has to be also bhakti mishrit, and that will help me keep my ego in check and also understand that every situation I'm getting to work is also his, and it has to be for him only. That was the second one, which is like more a reiteration. And as you said, this is a chapter which kind of, gives the crux of what we have gone through. So human life is very precious. And, so far before the satsangs, maybe 3 years back, I think my change of thought started from the time I started this Gita class. This was maybe his grace again. I would have done something, I feel, and hence, because this is so precious, every step and now that we do so many satsangs, we are way ahead in our Gita chapters. We need to realize, or I will have to know that everything I do, I have a choice, and I have to stop myself and make that choice, which takes me more to him, which means where more to him is moksha is like giving up even my individualized self. Giving up my ego, my rag dvesh, my desires. And yeah, it's not easy sometimes when you don't buy something. Not that you don't, it's just because you want to follow the principles. I've seen, for a few times, sometimes I feel that, oh, why am I not buying? And I go into that zone. But then you have to bring yourself back and say, no, this is not the right choice. The right choice is to give away and still be happy and learn from it. And so hence this was kind of again hammering myself that this is the path to follow. Yeah,
Absolutely. So जब हम लोग से हमारे पास इतने पुराने हैबिट्स के इतने रेसिड्यूअर्स है ना हमारे दिमाग में, so when our intellect now tells us कि यार ये करना सही नहीं है, I like doing it, but it is actually not as per scriptures. I shouldn't do it. So your intellect will say one thing, your mind will say something else. और उन दोनों के बीच में वो लड़ाई रहेगी. I want to do it, I want to do it, don't do it, don't do it, don't do it. So when your intellect prevails, your mind is not going to sit quietened. It is going to rebel. It is going to come back and tell you again and again how upset it is. And it is going to come back again and again, question your decision. Right? Like a child, when you start setting boundaries for a child, or when you start, now we have a small dog, right? We just got a dog, it's like less than a week old. We're trying to train him, right? And we're trying to train him, and he's constantly flouting all rules. You have to constantly come back and tell him, कि यही करना है, यही करना है, यही सही है, right? That's part of training the dog. That's the same thing with our mind. है ना? We have to train ourselves. Mind आगे बार-बार करेगा. We have to live with that agitation. And like in yesterday's रामचरितमानस class, शालिनी दीदी emphasized कि जब ये हो आपके साथ, होगा, expect it. your mind is not going to suddenly change. Your habits will not suddenly change, but constantly, slowly, you keep hammering it in. Every time your intellect wins over your mind weakens a little bit. Your habit weakens a little bit. One by one, slowly it will weaken up. But that agitation in the middle, what do you do with that? How do you handle it? Handle it through bhakti. Give your mind to Bhagwan Ji. Show that agitation to him. Observe that agitation. Observe how you're feeling because you said no to your mind and what it makes you feel. And then you will see कि यार क्या emotions ये create कर रहा है और यही वो emotions हैं which impel me into acting in a different fashion. Now I have to give this over to Bhagwan Ji and observe it and say, Bhagwan Ji, see, this is what it is. These are the demons inside me that you need to come and kill. Give it over to Bhagwan Ji. That's how slowly, we change our wrong impressions that we've created over a long period of time. Our sanskars get changed one at a time. Thank you.
I can go next. I think again, this class was also reiteration of whatever we have learned over the last many years. And it is Maya which is played all around us. And with this discipline, as you said, yam and niyam, with that discipline, you can try and control. I mean, not control, but try and maneuver through this Maya when you know that everything is given by him. And also, I feel it's very liberating when you just leave it. When you feel that you have to do everything, this I have to control, that I have to control, you're working yourself too much. And eventually, you can't control 99% of the things. So when you just leave it, right? This is all going to happen. I'll just observe. I'll do what is required out of me. And the simple principles, right, of duty and, not be judgmental in likes, dislikes, non-involvement, attachment, it really helps you sail through it. I've been observing myself over the last 1 week. Just it's too early to say much, but it just helps. At the end of the day, I feel a little liberated that yeah, I did not get involved in a lot of these things, did not let a certain disappointment hover over me or take over my day. And at the same time, did not get elated if some praise came on my way, right? So it's just helped me to be a little more stable in the journey. Secondly, I just wanted to bring it up. I read this book and I found it very interesting. It's called The Palace of Illusions. It's about Draupadi. And it's very interesting how the author has brought in a lot of Gita principles and Krishna sayings into it. So if you are into some kind of reading interest, then do pick it up. You will find that, oh, I read this. I had heard about it. It was part of my Gita class. So, it has been put together in very nice way.
Thank you, Smith.
I can go next. For me, the concept of the individualized self being immovable, but only the body coming and going was something of something different, because we always think that it comes in and goes away. Body is the one which it comes into and goes, but it's stationary and the bodies are coming and going. Our point of view is from where the point of reference is what is that was interesting. And also the fact that we are right now, I think control is way off. Like I cannot control anything, but at this stage I can at least observe myself and see where things are happening, at what level and I am, and how certain emotions are influencing me, and how the agitation comes in and goes. And so I'm at that stage. So yeah, this makes sense. And Yam will come. I think it's still not here. It is going to come hopefully soon. Yeah.
Practice through practice.
Practice.
छोटे छोटे यम और नियम हमें लेते रहना चाहिए.
Right.
When we take on yam niyam for ourselves, when we impose restrictions on ourselves, and that means we are doing voluntary tap. अगर हम voluntary कर लेंगे तो involuntary तप थोड़ा कम होगा.
Yes.
तप तो करना.
Yes, there has been progress. Yes, but yeah, slow progress. Definitely.
Progress is good.
Yes.
One step at a time. And like we said, remember, revolution नहीं होता इस दुनिया में कुछ भी. Nature does not like revolution, it likes evolution. So it's natural कि धीरे धीरे ही होगा. That's good.
Thank you.
So I'll go next. When we talked about Bhakti Mishrit Karma Yoga, so I think how I do it is like it in time slots. Either it's only bhakti or only karma. When I'm doing only bhakti, it's only like bhakti. I don't do karma. When I'm doing my work or doing something else, there's no bhakti. There's no reminder. Basically, there are some times like when it comes and goes, but it's not always. It's not bhakti and karma is not together always. They are separated either or. So I'll try to do both of them together. Like remember that when I'm doing karma yoga, then bhakti should also be there, and otherwise also. That was one thing which I realized about myself, and then yeah, the concept of how the body comes and goes. I think I had read it earlier that, body is like clothes, like how we changed clothes, the individualized self change bodies. I had always known that concept, but still somehow I thought that, there's body, the self comes into it and then leaves, but it's the body which comes and leaves. That's the thing. And yeah, the last part about controlling the agitation of mind, because on like on daily basis there are things which intellect tells us that do this thing, but mind will always tell you the opposite of that thing. So we have to always do what mind is telling not to do. So yeah, following those things.
Great. So I think one of the your first insight is actually pretty strong, huh? कि हम लोग या तो भक्ति करते हैं या हम लोग कर्म करते हैं, right? So the moment we are out there in the world, we forget भगवान जी. फिर उसके बाद आके भगवान जी भगवान जी भगवान जी, right? And that doesn't get us anywhere. That's true for all of us. That's a phenomenal insight. And once you've had that insight, you will realize why we have been constantly given that अनुष्ठान of 6 months of नाम जप. बिकॉज वो अगर आप छोटा सा एक नंबर लोगे ना, 2 माला, 4 माला, 6 माला, 10 माला, ये सारे नंबर्स नो, इवन अप टू लाइक 5, 6, 7, 8, वो यू कैन देन सेपरेट द टू वर्ल्ड्स. कि आप एक जगह पे बैठो, आपने अपनी माला कर ली, सुबह कर ली, शाम को कर ली, बीच में बैठे हैं कुछ नहीं कर रहे, थोड़ी सी माला कर ली, एंड बाकी टाइम पे हम अपना कर्म कर रहे हैं इस दुनिया में. बट वेन यू टेक ऑन अ लार्जर चैलेंज, minimum 16 malas, you do 16 malas, you take on the challenge of 32 malas, right? And when I say you take on the 32 malas ka challenge, don't take it on as your ego. Surrender to Bhagwan ji and say, boss, I want to do this, and with your help, I need your blessings, you make me do this, है ना? मैं अपने आप तो नहीं कर सकती. When you take on that challenge, there is no way you're going to get to 16, 32, 64 malas without constantly doing Nam Jap through the day as you're doing Karma Yoga. So that reminder that you are missing will become very, very much present through the entire day. That is your connection. That is your first level of reminder for yourself. So when we do this Anushtan starts in November, you should take on a larger number, minimum 16 malas or preferably larger than that. Minimum 16 malas. You take on 16 malas and trust me, this problem will start to fade away slowly. Because now you will have constant reminder and you will start to move towards Bhakti Mishra Karma Yoga. The day you reach 64 malas, you will not be able to do any action without remembering it. Phenomenal. Thank you, everyone, and have a lovely, lovely week ahead. And I'll see you next week then. And I'll get Abhinav to post the dates for us to select for the chapter 14 quiz.
Closing show class.
Oh, yeah. Kakuli.
ॐ सर्वेषां स्वस्तिर्भवतु, सर्वेषां शान्तिर्भवतु, सर्वेषां पूर्णं भवतु, सर्वेषां मङ्गलं भवतु। ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्तिः। ॐ सर्वे भवन्तु सुखिनः, सर्वे सन्तु निरामया, सर्वे भद्राणि पश्यन्तु, मा कश्चित् दुःखभाग् भवेत्। ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्तिः। ॐ असतो मा सद्गमय, तमसो मा ज्योतिर्गमय, मृत्युर्मा अमृतं गमय। ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्तिः। ॐ पूर्णमद पूर्णमिदं पूर्णात् पूर्णमुदच्यते, पूर्णस्य पूर्णमादाय पूर्णमेवावशिष्यते। ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्तिः। ॐ ॐ नारायण नारायण।